Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to the intersection of faith and the culture. WallBuilders Live is a place where we talk about the hottest topics of the day from a biblical, constitutional, and historical perspective. And that conversation takes place with David Barton. He's America's premier historian and the founder of WallBuilders, with Tim Barton, national speaker and pastor and president of WallBuilders, and myself, Rick Green. I'm a former Texas legislator and America's Constitution coach. Now, I say it takes place between the three of us, but it also usually involves a special guest, which is going to be coming up in the middle of our program today. Jeremy Dice is going to be with us, and he's going to be talking about some really cool religious liberty announcements, and looking forward to having him on for that conversation. But first, I want to encourage you to visit our websites today, wallbuilderslive.com and wallbuilders.com. Now, I throw those out there. If you never heard the word WallBuilders before, if somebody just sent you this link, or you found us on a podcast app on your phone, or maybe you just happen to be driving and you're listening to us on one of the 300 stations we're on across the country, WallBuilders, you need to know what that means. It comes from a scripture in Nehemiah that says, "Arise and rebuild the walls, that we may no longer be a reproach." And what was happening there was that without the outer walls of that city, you were run over. It was essential to the strength of the country. And so about 30 years ago, God put on David Barton's heart to create an organization called WallBuilders to rebuild the walls. He was reading through Nehemiah over and over and over again and seeing how God restored the nation, and said, how can we do that in America? And it comes down to restoring the foundations, the principles that make a nation great in the first place. And so that's what we do here at WallBuilders. And we do that mostly through this discussion here on the radio program about how to bring back a biblical, historical, and constitutional perspective, but then not just discussion, but actually taking action in the community. And that's where you come in. Of course, we do that all over the nation, and we do that in our own communities, but we're challenging you to do the same thing in your community. And we want to equip you as best we can. We do that here on the program through what we believe, and people tell us, is an entertaining discussion of these things, and also through tools that will, in an entertaining and an inspiring way, equip you to be a good citizen. It really just comes down to that, teaching good civics and showing people how to be good citizens and how to live out the freedom that we've been blessed with. And those tools are available to you at those websites I mentioned earlier, wallbuilders.com and wallbuilderslive.com. Now, wallbuilderslive.com, we also want to encourage you to make a contribution, and here's why. It takes finances to wage war. It takes finances to impact a culture. And so when you get involved and you decide to be like a founding father, and they were willing to give of their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, when you do that, you give of your time, that's your life, by studying, by listening, by sharing this program with other folks, by hosting a Constitution class in your community, by challenging and encouraging your pastor and your church to be salt and light in the community. All of those things take time. And then fortunes, that's finances. Just like the founding fathers, it took finances to win the Revolutionary War. It takes finances today to be able to engage effectively. When you donate at wallbuilderslive.com, that's what you're doing. You're investing in freedom. You're coming alongside us here at WallBuilders, and by doing so, becoming a part of the solution. So please consider doing that at wallbuilderslive.com today. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Jeremy Dice will be with us from First Liberty. We're going to be talking about some victories in religious liberty. We for many years had to talk about all the defeats. I mean, religious liberty was being attacked on every front in America, and it's been so fun the last few years to be able to talk about some of those victories. That's what we're going to do when we come back from the break. So stay with us. You're listening to WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Elections are approaching, yet many Christians find involvement in civil government to be a distraction. After all, there are so many demands in our time. There's our careers and homes and families, and especially our children. However, the Founding Fathers did not believe that involvement in civil government was a distraction from our families. In fact, they believed just the opposite. As Samuel Adams explained, every citizen will see, and I hope be deeply impressed with a sense of it, how exceedingly important it is to himself and how intimately the welfare of his children is connected with it, that those who are to make the laws should be men of singular wisdom and integrity. By being involved in civil government and electing wise leaders, we actually secure a better life for our children. Therefore, for your children's sake, be actively involved in this year's elections.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. Jeremy Dice back with us from First Liberty Institute, one of our favorite organizations on the planet. Kelly Shackelford and that team does incredible work on religious liberty and so many other important constitutional issues. Jeremy, thanks for what you guys do, man, and thanks for a few minutes today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hey, you guys brought attention to what the president is doing on religious liberty. Of course, you've done that, for 3 years. We've all, been amazed at the judicial appointments. You guys have a tracker basically on the website on that. You've really helped inform people on the big differences being made. This one is specifically now President Trump doing everything he can to, I guess on one level, public schools, making sure that religious liberty is protected there, and prayer, and several other areas. But tell us what, I think Kelly was even at the White House when they had this announcement, Coach Kennedy there. What was this all about, and what can the president do without Congress with regard to the agencies that implement a lot of this? That's a lot of questions, Jeremy. That was totally unfair. It's like, okay, Jeremy, there's my 3 minutes. Now you talk for 10, and we'll see. No, seriously, I don't know which part of that you want to pick on, but go for it.
Well, let's start at the constitutional level, because that's a great place to begin. And that's where the president gets the responsibility to make sure that the laws are faithfully executed. That's his job. And Congress has given him, they pass the laws, and they say, hey, go make sure this is carried into effect. And the way that we do that in our executive agencies these days is through regulation and guidance and that sort of thing. So there's this is all flowing from what the Constitution requires. Number one, that there's religious liberty to be respected in our country. Congress then takes that and passes various laws that ensure that religious liberty is well protected. So they've passed things like the Equal Access Act that protects students who are forming religious groups to have the same access to resources from the school as their secular counterparts and secular groups would be able to have. There are things like the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which makes sure that the government can't substantially burden your free exercise without at least a compelling reason to do so, and a variety of things like that. And so, what the Congress does with those is then they just say, hey, go execute these. Go make sure these things are carried into effect, and that's what the president does. And
they say this is what we want to see happen, but then it's the president and the executive branch that has to faithfully execute that then and make sure that does happen. And then that involves thousands of bureaucrats at the federal level.
Exactly.
And so he's got to direct in some way how they implement that.
Precisely. And so he's got to go in, and I'm glad we're able to have Civics 101 again on this call. He's got to go then and give direction throughout the federal bureaucracy, which of course is probably way too bigger than it needs to be at least, or certainly bigger than it was when our nation was founded. And within that, there are all kinds of little things. And so let's just take education as one good example. One of the things that the president put out there was a guidance on prayer and religious liberty within the public schools. And that document's actually supposed to be regularly updated. I think every 2 years it's supposed to be updated. It rests in the Department of Education. They're responsible for the ones that are supposed to be, updating the thing with regularity. Well, that hasn't been updated since 2003. And so you've gone through Bush 43, you've gone through Obama, and the first couple years of President Trump without that document being updated. And thankfully now it is updated. And the updates to it are really fantastic. What they've basically done in this guidance is to say, look, there are certain laws that are on the books that you've got to follow, public school students and teachers and administrators. Here's what the laws are. And on top of the laws, of course, we've got that third branch of government, the judiciary. And the judiciary has enacted or has opined on a variety of fronts as well. And here's what they've said on these laws and on the First Amendment and your responsibility towards religious liberty of our school students here in this country. And so this guidance that's come out has really updated that language quite heavily, as a matter of fact, to explain the additional freedoms that our students possess today that they may not have had back in 2003, or at least that were not recognized by the courts in 2003, or at least the nuance that was out there within those decisions is now fully updated. That document, by the way, is then sent to every single school district in the country, and they actually have a responsibility to certify that they are in compliance with that guidance. And so in order to receive any federal funding, every school district has to certify that they are in compliance with that that guidance. And if they're not, I guess the question mark is whether or not that funding would be removed, but potentially it would be, because they have to abide by the laws of the United States in order to receive federal funding. So that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it's a huge deal. And I think of two things where that becomes very practical in terms of the religious liberty protections in our communities, and for guys like y'all that come alongside students and teachers and others that have to defend those rights. The first one being that having a president in the White House and a staff that loves religious liberty and is going to defend it at the time these things are rewritten and sent out to the schools is vital, because I'm assuming the language in this thing is very different depending on your perspective and how you write it. And you could be an Obama saying, hey, you got to let boys go into girls' bathrooms and all the other things that he was for in implementing education laws. Or you have a president that's saying, hey, we're going to protect religious liberty. You got to allow that kid to pray. So that's one, is just who's at the helm when this is written. But then two, now that has been written and sent out to those schools, when a kid's religious liberties are violated and you come alongside them to defend them, you're able to point to that document and to that school's receipt of that document and say, you're not following the law on this.
Yeah, and we can drop a little CC line at the bottom there to the Department of Education to say, by the way,
Nice.
You might want to check to see if they've actually certified that they're compliant, because here's an instance of them not being in compliance with your own guidance. And so you may want to take a little bit. So that's a pretty heavy weight to put around the neck of those who are wanting to silence the religious liberty of students. Let me give you just an example of what that looks like.
Sure.
We've had several students, and one just recently, as a matter of fact, that have been denied the opportunity to form a religious club within their school district here. And that's as old as I am. That law is. It's actually just a little younger than I am these days, unfortunately. But that law, the Equal Access Act, has been around since I think I was 6 years old or something like that. And it requires you to be able to have these religious clubs if you're going to have secular clubs as well. Well, this continues to be a problem, shockingly enough. In fact, we've had students that were told that it's not just wrong, that it's actually illegal for them to have this, and that they could actually go to jail if they were to form these clubs within the public schools, which is just absolutely asinine and absurd.
You're going to go to jail for exercising your constitutional right of freedom of religion, even though it's student-led, student-organized. Crazy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's ludicrous. And so for school districts to say that to students, if they're acting out of ignorance, and let's grant them that they probably are, they can be quickly informed by a quick glance at this guidance. That solves that problem. Yeah. But if they're acting intentionally and with some sort of animus towards religion, then it's right and proper for us as the citizens, as we the people, to say, we're going to hold you accountable here, and here's how. If you're going to violate intentionally the civil rights of our students, we're going to see to it that we remove the hard-earned tax dollars that would otherwise flow to you from the federal government from your school district, because those school districts who are refusing to abide by the document to which we would hold ourselves accountable, the Constitution and the First Amendment, which is within it, do not deserve to receive federal taxing on that whole thing. So these are strong things. Now, look, we've never had to come to that point. We've never had to actually assert that privilege, but that's something that actually now hangs over the head. And that's just one of several things that President Trump has done with his new guidance, his new memos on religious liberty. There are other things within the other agencies. For instance, the Department of Labor and a number of the other agencies have passed contracting rules. This is a shocking one, right? That if you're going to have an organization that is religious be a subcontractor with the federal government, supplying some sort of need or service to the federal government to execute the laws there through a federal contract, you can't discriminate against them because they are actually religious. You know, this was a case that we had to fight with a couple years ago called Trinity Lutheran versus Comer, where they said that you have two schools that are completely the same. They do the same thing in the same way. The difference is that one comes from a Lutheran school and with that religious tradition behind it. The other one does not. Well, the one that does not receive the state funding from Missouri for a playground, some stuff they would lay down on the gravel there.
It's that tire stuff that I remember this case. They cut up the so the kid doesn't break both arms when they fall off the monkey bars. Only one. No, I'm kidding.
Exactly.
Anyway,
right. Yeah. So they give it to the school that was secular, but deny it to the one. They deny them from even being eligible for the religious school, and that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Yeah. And what the federal government has now proposed through these notices of rulemaking and these proposed rules here is they're going to say, look, the law has changed, or at least the law has been updated and recognized by the Supreme Court that you have to treat religious organizations fairly and equally with non-religious and secular organizations. And I mean, look, this is just like kindergarten stuff. You got to treat people fairly and politely and the same, right?
Crazy
and
that
this ought to be a basic thing. And now these new rules that the president has adopted or has proposed are going to do that basic fairness thing.
Yeah, it brings us back to what people would have thought was the situation anyway, and it's why we've had so many shocking programs over the last 10, 12, 15 years about situations just like you're talking about, where you got to scratch your head and go, "This is happening in America." But you said something earlier that I think is key here, and that you haven't had to drop the hammer and go all the way on the funding thing and all that, because you have these tools now to sit down. The thousands of times when like you said, maybe out of ignorance, but sometimes out of hostility towards religion, a school official prevents a kid from living out their religious liberty. When that happens now, they can call on you guys at First Liberty, and you can make the phone call and probably take care of it in a matter of days by simply pointing to these things. It really allows you guys to do your job in an even bigger and better and faster way, and actually helps the school districts. It makes it clear this is the law. You might have been misinformed by an attorney that doesn't do religious liberty cases. A lot of times they have attorneys advising these school boards and whatnot that just don't deal with this kind of stuff before. So I'm excited about how quickly this will help to stop a lot of that abuse of the Constitution that takes place in these school districts by equipping you guys with this tool. So I could see many of these cases going away much faster than in the past what you guys had to do.
I certainly hope so. And really, the really practical effect of all of these things is something that's right in front of us. So let's just state it. The mere fact that the leader of the free world is talking about the importance of religious liberty and saying that the administration, their feet are directed towards more religious freedom than less, sends an enormous message. The very fact that we're talking about the fact that the president prefers more religious liberty over less, is going
and
to
school prayer. He's talked specifically about the importance of school prayer and kids being able to pray in school. You're right.
Exactly. And so that little visual element says a lot to students who are in Honey Grove, Texas, or
it does.
In Beckley, West Virginia, or something like that, where they're able to say, okay, the president thinks that religious liberty is good. The president's important. It must be okay for me to be able to reference my religion at school as well. Maybe it shouldn't be that way, but the reality is when important people like the president say important things like he said, that religious liberty is itself important, we tend to get the message that maybe just perhaps religious liberty is an important thing.
No, it's one of the most important things a president can do. I mean, leading in that example, and some people might call it a bully pulpit, but I mean, it's literally the pulpit. It's giving you that platform to influence the culture in that way. Such a good thing. Jeremy, we appreciate you guys. Website real quick for First Liberty.
FirstLiberty.org, F-I-R-S-T, liberty.org.
FirstLiberty.org, folks. You can donate there if you have an issue on religious liberty and you need good counsel. These guys are amazing. Go to that website today. Get on their email list. Help support them in what they do. Jeremy, let's do it again soon, man. Thanks for your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
Stay with us, folks. We'll be right back with David and Tim Barton. Have you noticed the vacuum of leadership in America? We're looking around for leaders of principle to step up, and too often, no one is there. God is raising up a generation of young leaders with a passion for impacting the world around them. They're crying out for the mentorship and leadership training they need. Patriot Academy was created to meet that need. Patriot Academy graduates now serve in state capitals around America, in the halls of Congress, in business, in the film industry, in the pulpit, and every area of the culture. They're leading effectively and impacting the world around them. Patriot Academy is now expanding across the nation, and now's your chance to experience this life-changing week that trains champions to change the world. Visit patriotacademy.com for dates and locations. Our core program is still for young leaders 16 to 25 years old, but we also now have a citizen track for adults. So visit the website today to learn more. Help us fill the void of leadership in America. Join us in training champions to change the world at patriotacademy.com. We're back here on WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us. Special thanks to Jeremy Dice for joining us today on WallBuilders Live. And we are back with David and Tim Barton.
I was really, when this announcement came out by President Trump, I was kind of floored because all the media played this thing as President Trump has put prayer back in schools. And I thought, what? He can't.
How did he do that?
I love it, but he can't do that. You can't put prayer back in schools. Well, that was their visceral reaction to this. And that's not what he did. What he did was clarify something, and this, what he clarified was significant. It goes back to 2003, as Jeremy mentioned, and it goes back to Secretary of Education Rod Page. Under George W. Bush, No Child Left Behind, they came out and said, look, here's where all the law is right now. And I hate saying law because it's not. It's here where all the court decisions are. Court decisions aren't law. But they said, here's where the law is, and here's where the court decisions are. Here's what you can and can't do in schools. And so at that point in time, when Secretary Page announced that, he said, we're going to be working on this over the next several months. About, I guess it's 18 months later, Tim. You remember how long?
No,
Maybe
I don't.
18 months. They came out with a final paper, and the final paper said, here's what students and teachers and administrators can do regarding religious liberty at schools. And they came out with a form that says every single LEA, which is a local education agency, which is your local school, has
Or
to,
law enforcement agency.
Ooh, it could be, but it wasn't in this case.
Of course, those are Leos. I'll let that slide.
Leos, yeah. So every LEA has to certify to the SEA, which is the state education agency, that you're in full compliance with religious liberty mandates, that you're not keeping any of the kids from doing this. And if you do not get certified for that, then you lose all your federal funding. And that can be 6 to 9% of federal funding. Well, that's a lot. A lot of schools claim to run on the margin. So that was a really big bite. I did not recognize that this was supposed to be updated every 2 years. That was news to me. And so it did not get updated again in the Bush administration. It did not get updated at all in the Obama administration. So what President Trump is doing is simply what the law required. He's updated this, and it should have happened probably 6 or 7 more times prior to this, every 2 years. And now we've had more religious liberty decisions that have come down. So you are literally getting closer to being able to have prayer in schools again just by simply looking at what's out there.
Well, and let me also point out to me, Rick, one of the funny things when you were explaining part of how the process works, and Jeremy says, oh, yeah, well, here we go, back again, Civics 101. And when he said Civics 101, I thought, now, wait a second. Who in the last 20 years has had a civics course? Because that's not even taught anymore.
3% of schools have civic courses. 3%.
Right. So I thought, this isn't Civics 101. This is Civics 00001 maybe, right? Nobody knows this anymore. And so, Rick, I was very grateful that you explained some more of this process. But this is one of the reasons that there's even levels of frustration with members of the media and with different political factions when President Trump does something that actually is legal, because they don't even recognize what is legal, what's not legal anymore. And really, that's not even the point for most of them, because they just don't like President Trump and they want to disparage anything he says anytime, even when he's right. Back up State of the Union when he was saying really positive things about how that we now have more minority communities that are employed and they have jobs and entrepreneurs, and right, and we should be applauding that. And there was a whole section of the crowd there in Congress who would not applaud, because it's not about what necessarily is always beneficial and good. It's about my side winning. Nonetheless, we just don't understand how civics works anymore. And Dad, as you're mentioning, 2003 is when this was updated. Last, supposed to be every 2 years, which certainly it hasn't been. But also, it's interesting, one of the things that President Trump has done is when he has done things, whether it be a proclamation, whether it be an executive order, largely they have been constitutional. And it made me think, if this is supposed to be updated every 2 years, how do we know it's going to be good every 2 years? But what President Trump has done, even in helping update some of these standards, or at least under his administration, they've been updated, is they've always been limited to constitutional actions. And this is where, again, I'm continually impressed. And I probably shouldn't be surprised anymore, although sometimes I am, about how often what President Trump does is limited and guided by the Constitution. And now that we're coming to the point where every school has to comply with this or they're going to lose their government funding. And now the new compliance is you have to acknowledge religious liberty. Guys, this is not a victory we thought we would probably be celebrating when President Trump was running against Hillary Clinton, right? Like, this probably wasn't something we're like, what's going to happen here in a couple years? We're going to have prayer back in schools, and the president's going to be the one promoting this. This is really an impressive thing. And as Jeremy pointed out, right, the fact that you have the president of the United States, the leader of the free world, who is saying that we want prayer back in schools, even the fact he's talking about school prayer is huge, because now parents are hearing, hey, kids should be praying in school. They're allowed to pray in school, which contradicts what they've heard for literally decades. And knowing that the president, who, right, the arm of the leader of the executive branch, the arm of kind of law enforcement, is saying, no, this is okay. We're promoting this. We want to do this. This is a huge win coming from President Trump.
It is a huge win, and I really like the word hammer. I mean, that's not what I would normally have thought, but this is a hammer, because when you have school districts that are recalcitrant and do not want to allow religious expressions, when you've got school districts like the Plano School District in Texas, Tim, how long did that lawsuit go on the candy canes? Was it 12 or 13 years or whatever?
It was
They
over
lost
12
at
years.
every level. They lost at every level, and the same with the Coons cheerleaders. And their schools are just not going to give in and let you have religious expression. All right, let's just chop your funding. Let's take away 9 to 10% of your funds and see how that feels. And so the fact that they are now tying money to being constitutional, and again, they're not making up the standards here. They're using the standards that the courts have set forth based on what the Supreme Court has said in current rulings. So they're saying, guys, you will be constitutional or we're not going to fund you. I mean, that is a standard I haven't heard in, I don't know, maybe my lifetime, that we're funding only what's constitutional with constitutional compliance. That is a really big deal. This really is a huge thing that's happened with President Trump.
Well, we seem to be saying that over and over and over again on this program, but it's just reaction to what's happening, what's actually being done by this administration. So many religious liberty victories over the last few years, and it's just exciting to see even another step here in the right direction to defend our constitutional freedoms, and specifically that First Amendment right to your conscience, to be able to live out your faith. It's such a vital part of what it means to be an American, and it is encouraging not only to have a president that will stand for that, but attorneys like Jeremy Dice and organizations like First Liberty and others that are out there defending those things for us. So that's why we do this here at WallBuilders Live, is to equip and inspire you to do the exact same thing. We thank you for coming alongside us. If you go to the website today at wallbuilderslive.com, you can make that contribution one time or monthly. You can also sign up to be on our email list and share those emails with your friends and family. You can grab these programs right there on the website and send them out on Facebook and Twitter and other social media tools. And then you can go to constitutioncoach.com and sign up to host our Constitution class in your community. Be sure and check that out today as well. Thanks for listening today. You've been listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand undivided.